E te whare, kia ora, and welcome to the first of our panel sessions. Someone doesn't need a mic in the room. Before I introduce our session, a reminder to please ask your questions via Slido. Given the number of questions we were getting this morning, I think everyone's got the hang of it now. But just please make sure you choose the correct session, otherwise there'll be a very confused moderator upstairs. Our session this morning is focused on inclusion, how we can ensure inclusive growth for all, why it matters, and what happens if we don't get it right. And in keeping with the theme of inclusion, remember to keep sharing your insights on social media for those that haven't been able to join us today. Hashtags should be on the screen. Yes? Right, our moderator for this session is someone who has been a champion for inclusion himself. And my fellow member of Asia 21, it is an absolute pleasure to introduce Jerry He, the founding chairman of the Asia Pacific MSME Trade Coalition, a 4,000 strong member organization that helps businesses to trade across borders, facilitates more permissible trade policies, and serves as a data repository for micro, small to medium enterprises. Jerry has also founded and is a director of several FMCG brands and also serves on several boards on in the tertiary education sector. All yours. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you. Thank you, Zaina. Kia ora koutou. Ohayou gozaimasu. Buenas noches. Hohe. 早晨. 早上好. So welcome to the inclusive session. So life without diversity will be so boring. I'm a Chinese Kiwi who lived here for 22 years, background in business, and now devoting myself of my prime time, turning 40 this year, into higher education. So it's my great pleasure to moderate this panelist. We have some diverse panel, as you can see, very high caliber speakers along today. So before I start this moderating session, I would like to leave you with one business idea. It's about inclusion. A store that recently came out from Alibaba is called Left Out Store. So I guess there's approximately 10% of human beings are lefties. And in New Zealand, approximately 500,000 people, thereabout. And there is only one offline shop in Dargaview is selling exclusively to lefties. So, there are sources around Alibaba that you can source. There's opportunity to open an e-commerce store and trade me or yourself. You are having instantly 500,000 customers in front of you. Talking about inclusiveness. Okay, all right, back to the panel. It's my absolute pleasure to moderate this diverse panel. I would like to set the scene a little bit clearer. Each of the speakers will have 5 minutes of their time to giving you a presentation. And please, I would like to encourage you to use Slido right now. Don't wait for it. And I'll be able to see your questions right here. And after the speakers, I will be able to read out your questions. One specific requirement, if you have specific questions that you want to ask someone, please leave their name as well. This question is for such and such. Then I'll be able to divert them to the right person. Or if you leave it blank, I will just ask a blanket questions. Each and every one of us will be able to reply to you as well. So without further ado, if I can introduce you to Keio. Keio was born in Japan and has chosen Aotearoa, New Zealand, as her second home. Using her cultural agility, she has created value-add business worldwide across the food, nutrition, and agriculture businesses, including biosecurity and traceability. She held a number of leadership roles with Fonterra, its predecessor, as well as with public-private partnership organizations. Her current focus is on lifting the value of Nziia brand for farmers and growers through environmental sustainability credentials. She loves rugby and aeroplanes and can explain the difference between a ruck and a mole or the Spitfire and the Hurricane. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Keio. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. and tēnā koutou katoa. Today, I would like to share with you two concepts. First, an outside-in perspective, and second, diversity and inclusion as a key enabler for Aotearoa New Zealand. But before I do, let's do a quick exercise. Just imagine you're holding a glass of milk in your hand, and you can join me in holding the glass of milk in your hand as well. Have a sip. Have a sniff. What words would you use to describe what you've just smelled and tasted? Fresh, creamy, milky, perhaps yummy? And I agree. But when I first came to New Zealand, those were not the words I would have used to describe the flavor of milk. The first thing that came to my mind was the cow shit, grass, and cow manure. Not that I have ever tasted cow manure. Why is that? I was born in Japan and grew up drinking Japanese milk. And because of the different farming practice and processing, milk in Japan tasted completely different. So in other words, my background meant the concept of the norm was completely different. And I think that's a real important concept to be aware of in terms of inclusion. It's really important to understand how other people see things and what the definition of the norm is. It's a matter of being aware that when you think of the norm, it may not be perceived as such elsewhere. And it's the first step toward inclusion. Now, why is it important for us to be aware of the different perspectives? Because New Zealand's economic prosperity depends on it. We are a small nation, small export nation, a team of 5 million, as Jacinda says, and 10 million cattle and 30 million sheep. We export over 90% of what we produce in terms of primary production, which represents 2/3 of the merchandise export. And it creates almost $50 billion in export income. It's really a challenge to try to bring in the different perspectives. But what's in our favor is the changing demographics in New Zealand. The 2018 census showed that almost 30% of people who are counted were born overseas, outside New Zealand, representing almost every country in the world. And that included 15 people born at sea. So the concept diversity and inclusion as an enabler. Diversity is uncomfortable and it can create tension, but it also brings in different perspectives and different opportunities. The homogeneity, like Japan, where over 98% of the population are ethnically Japanese. It's comfortable because you know what to expect, no surprises. But that can result in a culture that is less change-ready. So diversity creates innovation because of different perspectives. And a different perspective actually can lead to new business opportunities. By bringing in a broad viewpoints, you can create new markets, new market segments, new ways of differentiating your products or different approaches. So we have an option of either feeling uncomfortable with diversity or embrace it because it creates innovation. Diversity and inclusion is not just a nice concept or a nice word. It has tangible benefits. So I would like to end with a key concept, which is the concept number 3, although I said I would like to share with you two concepts. That is, this is your comfort zone. But this is where the magic happens, enabled by diversity and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Keo. So next up will be Jorge. So Jorge is a director at the Center of International Studies, Pontificia University of Chile. Jorge is passionate in creating more public support for trade and its new narrative, including foreign investment, free trade agreements, and among others. Can I please get Jorge to start your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Good afternoon from Chile. It's my first experience in this mixed model, and I hope you are enjoying the conference. I wanted to focus in the two questions that you made for the panel. Are there wider policies that can help mitigate the growing gap and restore the social license around trade agreements? And how can they move to a greater levels of inclusion and equality? I think that first we need to take in account the context. Before COVID, we had witnesses the growing of anti-globalization sentiment, being the subprime crisis in 2008, the tipping point. Globalization means trade, immigration, finance, technology, a wide variety of aspects. And in 2018, according to the Pew Research Center, public still support trade as a concept in principle, but many questions its benefits, creating jobs, decreasing prices, increasing wages. With the COVID, we have seen different tendencies. First, the trade disruptions. Small and medium enterprises, it's important for inclusion, has been hit particularly hard. According to the Facebook CEO, OECD and World Bank Future of Business Survey, among small and medium enterprises that remain open in 2020, between 55 and 70% saw sales fall. At the same time, many small and medium enterprises have been affected with the disruption of global value changes. Second, as a tendency, the strategic rivalry between US and China, it's important when we think about inclusion and the future of trade in this area. The less support for globalization, there's a less interest from powers for global responsibility, and we are transitioned to a modest multilateralism. However, there are still efforts for integration in Asia-Pacific. The RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Agreement, TPP-11, both that New Zealand has joined. In this new phenomenon, economic interest and political tensions coexist in this interdependent and integrated world. Another tendency is the accelerated digital transformation and technology disruption, and this is undoubtedly an opportunity for inclusion. For example, the Digital Economic Partnership Agreement that has signed New Zealand, Chile, and Singapore. And finally, in the context, the new realities and threats, climate change, cyber attacks, future pandemics. The challenge of inclusion in this panel, I believe, should take into account the reality of New Zealand, a medium country with robust institutional framework, an export-based economy, an open economy, and a country that's trying to figure out how to deal with the rise of China, its main trade partner. Based on the context I explained, coming back to the main questions, the wider policies that can help mitigate the gap, and how can we attain more levels of inclusion and equality. I think there are 5 challenges. First, the trust challenge. How can we restore public support and trust on trade? Countries should focus on the benefits and the beneficiaries of trade in a new bottom-up approach. 2 targets, inclusion for small and medium enterprises and economic empowerment. That is, for example, women on trade. The second challenge, the collaboration challenge. Pandemic has demonstrated that there is no vaccines without trade. Export performance and diversification need a greater number of export-capable companies. Third, the institutional challenge. For international organizations, there is a need to change to an audience mindset, a more systematic approach to engage with communities. For FTAs, new ways to negotiate, more openness, more transparency, effective mechanisms to public participation. As long as we close the public to the negotiations, we will create more conditions for public confidence and social license for trade. Finally, two challenges. The digital one, how to improve the ability of these micro, small, and medium startups to trade across borders, and with the right policy environment, can be a powerful force for inclusion, the digitalization. And finally, the policy challenge. To fully reap the benefits of inclusion, we need domestic reforms. Don't blame trade policy for all the problems regarding inequality and lack of inclusion. We need to move forward with concrete action plans like the Global Trade and Gender Arrangements initiative led by Canada, Chile, and New Zealand to address gender in trade. And finally, the New Zealand Trade for All report 2 or 3 years ago is a good example on these efforts. It states that governments should develop a policy for engaging with hard-to-reach communities and to provide a specific targeted support for women doing business internationally. In summary, inclusion, in my opinion, needs a comprehensive approach, including many challenges to create the right environment to move forward in this more complex global world. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't agree more because, from doing business in New Zealand, we always to start a business, and when we get to some sort of size, we think about global. It should be reversed back. Change your mindset, have export mindset to start with. Don't need to get there now, but have a plan. When you have a plan, you actually switch better. So thank you, Jorge. Next up will be Olivia. Olivia is fully Chinese, yet a quarter Kiwi and a dash of English. As you could tell, these numbers don't add up. Because in her opinion, we shouldn't put a cap on culture. Born and raised in China, Olivia moved to New Zealand at a young age. In the last 7 years, she finished her master's in international business with the University of Auckland, worked in financial services and telecom as a marketer before moving into FMCG and e-commerce. Now she runs her own consulting company, helping Kiwi businesses to reach Asian countries, customers, overseas and domestically. Olivia is passionate about bridging the gap between different cultures. She has given talks around various marketing and cultural intelligence topics. Being the moderator myself, I got the chance to raise the first question. Can you please tell me a little bit more? How do those numbers add up? Olivia, please, thank you.
The factors, is
Yes.
it working?
Yes.
They don't add up to 100%. I am 100% made in China. I've been in New Zealand for more than 7 years now, and now I'm engaged to an Englishman. That's why there's a dash of English there, and he is a lefty. Very diverse family.
Business done.
So is it okay if I just stand right here?
Feel free to walk.
Because I'm very expressive. So imagine being in our group chat with two very traditional Chinese parents, a quarter Kiwi here, an Englishman, and 2 Generation Z, which is my brother and my brother's wife. In the group chat, we're talking English, we're talking Chinese, sometimes in Cantonese, with weird emojis that I don't understand, and pictures, voice, videos. It's fair to say that we have a very inclusive family, very open-minded, diverse. I'm sure here in the audience, any one of you have a family member that is not a Kiwi. Please put your hands up. Oh my God, look at that. That's more than half of the room. So now the challenge for us, the common challenge for us is how do you create this inclusive family? Because we are all from different culture and background. But before I dive into my personal story of how I create this inclusive family and happy, harmonious family, I would like to ask you a question. Anyone know what CQ means here? Yes. What does it mean? That gentleman over there. Yes. CQ is short for culture intelligence, or we could say culture quotient. Similar to IQ, it means one's capability to work and relate to different cultures. CQ play an important part in the process of my family. 7.5 years ago, my CQ level was basically 0. And my parents were basically probably negative because they'd never been to any overseas country. They couldn't speak English. They didn't see the value of me moving to New Zealand. They were really against of the idea marrying someone who's not a Chinese. I'm raised in a very traditional Chinese family. All they wanted me to do is to marry someone as soon as possible. By the age of 30, I should have 2 kids, settle down in the same hometown, ideally just next door, being neighbor with my family. And they didn't want me to go overseas because women, you just don't need such good education. So when I told them that I wanted to go to New Zealand, they were so shocked. I think that was the first CQ training for my parents when I made that decision. Developing CQ for me was easy because I'm here every day. I get to meet with people from different culture, and it helped boost my CQ massively. But for my parents, living in that tiny little town in China, even though we have 300,000 people in that little town, no one talk about equality, no one talk about inclusion and diversity. And they never know the concepts because they never talk about it, and it's not in their vocabulary. It was so difficult to convince them about me marrying someone who's non-Chinese and coming to New Zealand and settle down here. So what do I do? If you are in my situation, what would you do? So I called them in the last 7 years, every other week, without fail. And I tell them a mini New Zealand story every time. I tell them stories like, Kiwis, they walk on the streets with bare feet because streets are so clean here. I told them that our Prime Minister is a woman, and she took her baby to a United Nations meeting. That was awesome. They were so shocked when I told them these stories, and they're continuously being shocked, but they loved them. Slowly, they started to follow the WeChat account that I managed for my previous employers, Vodafone, ASB. They started to Google, we don't have Google in China, so they Baidu things in China. Where's New Zealand? Is New Zealand, Australia the same country? They started to Google that sort of stuff, and their CQ has improved so much. And in this journey, me and my family has become closer. And I kept them on the same page, and when we make decisions together. And on this group chat, we chat daily. So from CQ 0 to an inclusive family, it took me 7 years. And I'm still working on it. It's an ongoing journey. So now, my clients, they come to me and ask me, how can I make my products and brand more inclusive to Asian customers? I always go back and ask them the question, how much do you know about Asian customers? If you don't know about them, how do you expect them to understand your product and brands? Instead of telling them the answers, sometimes I told them the answers, but I would bring them onto a CQ journey. I take them to seminars like this, events like this. I took them to cultural events. When there's a Diwali or Chinese New Year Moon Festival, I took food to the office. I will tell them a little bit story about my journey in India, Nepal. The story of masala tea and why we have Moon Festival, why we have moon cake on Moon Festival. And I have noticed that through this journey, they've come to understand more about different cultures, and also when they make decisions, they make it quicker and wiser. And I don't tell them, the answers every time, but they get to make their own decisions better. In summary, 7 years of experience, I think that has proven that inclusion and equality is possible, because it happened in my little family, and it happened to my clients. But to make it happen, we need to remember that it's a long journey. You require determination to make it happen, constant communication, and open and growth mindset to continue to grow your CQ, to make inclusion and diversity happen. So today, I would encourage everyone here in the room to find an opportunity for you to develop your CQ. Talk to someone who's different from you. Ask them questions about their different culture, their background, and also give that person an opportunity to develop their CQ. So after this session, I hope you all chat to each other and get to improve your CQ straight away.
Thank you, Olivia. I could totally relate to that, because when we were young, we were given chances of subjects to study. My dad was saying, "Oh, would you like to choose law or being an accountant?" Or stretch them out a little bit, being a doctor. But I chose business. So it's totally relatable. All right, a lot of things going through my head right now. So last but not least, when we talk about family, we have the wonderful Teresa over here. Of course, you can read her bio through the website and also the booklet over there. But I would like to introduce Teresa in a different way. Teresa is a proud mother of 3 adult children and grandmother to 2 mokopuna, with a 3rd on the way. Family is everything to Teresa and her husband of 40 years. Teresa spends any spare time she has reading, walking, and meditating, and staying connected to her whānau, hapu, and iwi. Welcome, Teresa.
Ai tēnā rā tātou katoa, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā kārangaranga maha. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. He uri tēnei nō te tai tokerau, me te tāo tōku pāpā nō Ngāti Kahuki Whangaroa, e te tāo tōku māma nō Hokianga Hakapau Karakia. So I'm giving greetings to you all, the diverse mana that we bring to this room, the voices that we bring to this room collectively, and of course the thoughts that we share in this room as well. I just shared with you that in actual fact I hail from the far north. On my dad's side I'm from the east coast of Whangaroa, and on my mum's side from the west coast of Hokianga. So I can sail all those seas however I want. And I was going to make my way to the podium, and I've relentlessly let my notes down there. So I'm being brave and coming out there just to talk to you. Because, equity and inclusion are absolutely so essential in the life that I lead. And more predominantly through my role as CEO of Māori Women's Development. We were established more than 30 years ago, at least 35 years now, simply because it was very clear that wahine Māori could not get access to finance. I mean, the sad thing is that we're now 35 years now, and it's still the case. So why is that? Because the gaps are getting wider and wider. And so Māori Women's Development, we've taken it upon ourselves to, we do have a loan fund. And yes, of course we're concerned about finances, but 80% of what we do is about nurturing, is about empowering, building capability, building capacity, building confidence, so that inclusion is a norm and equity is absolutely accessible. In actual fact, our fund is 3%.